In this video, I'm going to look at what low intensity training offers that high intensity does not, and why low intensity training is critical for your performance. I started looking at why we do low intensity training in my last video. Links are in the notes. Now, to understand why low intensity training offers some fundamental advantages, we need to understand just how your body produces energy to the muscles during exercise. Now, spoiler alert, it's all about fat oxidation and how you train it. Exercise physiology is really complex, but here's a quick or simplified version. When you're exercising, your muscles can only use one molecule to create energy. This is called ATP. Now, unfortunately, your muscles only store about a 3-second supply of ATP, which means that you've got to constantly generate more ATP from the food you eat or from stored fat and carbohydrate in the body. Now, almost all of this energy comes from two processes. Either oxidation of fat and carbohydrate, which is known as aerobic energy production, or from glycolysis, which is splitting a glucose molecule in half without oxygen, known as anaerobic energy. Now, the body's always using both oxidation and glycolysis, but how much of each depends on exercise intensity. In the graph, I've plotted exercise intensity, which we measure as power output along the bottom, and your body's response along the vertical axis. There are typically three main ways we measure how hard your body is working as the intensity rises: breathing, heart rate, and lactate concentration. The higher the intensity, the faster your heart rate goes, the faster you breathe, and the more your lactate levels rise. If we look into the details a bit closer, whilst heart rate goes up in a straight line, lactate, which we can use as an approximation for glycolysis here, doesn't really rise that much at first because your oxidative system can handle the work largely by itself. Once lactate rises more noticeably, here at what we call the first lactate turn point, we cross from low to moderate intensity exercise. Now, moderate intensity, which most riders call tempo, we operate at a higher heart rate and a higher lactate level. But the important thing here is that our physiology is stable. This means that our lactate levels and heart rate remain more or less the same, and we can continue to push on for a relatively long period of time. Now, if we work harder still, you can see that we reach an intensity at which the lactate levels rise rapidly in an exponential fashion. This is known as the second lactate turn point. It's also called critical power or threshold power, or the maximal lactate steady state. Cyclists tend to call this FTP, although FTP is a less accurate measurement. If we work at or above this second lactate turn point, it's known as high intensity training because our physiology is no longer stable. This means our lactate levels just keep on rising until we're forced to stop or dramatically slow down. Now, just as a side note, it probably isn't the lactate that forces us to stop, but the acid that gets produced along with lactate that does this. Now, let's bring this knowledge back to low intensity training in the green zone. What fuel is your body predominantly using? At or below the first lactate turn point, your body is oxidizing or burning fat for fuel. Why does this even matter? Lots of reasons, but let's just start with two obvious ones. Burning fat for fuel for your performance produces far more energy than anaerobic energy. Oxidizing one fatty acid molecule produces around 39 ATP molecules to use for exercise. In contrast, splitting a glucose or sugar molecule via glycolysis only produces 2 ATP. Secondly, burning fat for fuel only produces two waste products, water and carbon dioxide. Water is not a problem for the body to handle, and we simply breathe the carbon dioxide out. Glycolysis, or splitting glucose in half, also has a big consequence, which is production of acid, which causes a rapid fatigue, makes you slow down, and when we're racing, we're usually trying to avoid this. We don't want a lot of glycolytic efforts early in the race. This is what we mean when we say the rider's hiding in the peloton and saving energy at the moment. But this high intensity glycolytic work is exactly what you need to do to launch your winning attack. Hence why trying to conserve energy and generate most of our energy aerobically is so important for racing. It allows you to spare some glucose for the race-winning moves in the finale. So what intensity do we maximally burn fat for fuel? Low intensity. This is typically at or below the first lactate turn point for both elite and amateur athletes alike, although individuals do vary depending on a range of factors including fitness level. If you check out the graph of fat oxidation rate, notice how the maximum oxidation rate is a fairly broad zone rather than a discrete point, meaning that you can think of this in terms of your own training as a range rather than a discrete power output number to target. This intensity zonal range is usually called Zone 2 training if you're using the 5-zone model, or Zone 1 training by others. Some people even call it fat max training. But the key thing here is that it occurs at low intensity, and it's the low intensity of the workout that helps your body to learn to burn fat effectively and preferentially as a fuel. Now, I'm sure not everyone is convinced just yet that low intensity is a key part of your training. So let's analyse those athletes who do perform higher volumes of low intensity training. What are they good at? The world's best endurance athletes have a better fat oxidation rate. They have a higher VO2 max. They have a higher fractional utilisation of VO2 max, or in other words, a higher threshold power. These are all the key metrics that determine endurance performance. So we can say that low intensity work appears to help our high intensity work too. Now in the graph here, we can see that a well-trained endurance athlete is capable of burning a lot more fat during exercise, which is measured in grams per minute, than someone who isn't well-trained. As a result, they can go much faster because they produce more energy with minimal waste products. Conversely, when we do high intensity work, your muscles definitely need to consume more and more carbohydrate for fuel. Now, if we just do high intensity all the time, we tend to reduce our fat burning ability because we've trained our body to rely on carbohydrates. And as a result, we might struggle to finish races strongly if we even finish them at all. In the next video, we're going to explore some new science about how low intensity work can enhance your response to high intensity intervals. So stick with me and let's delve deeper into why we do low intensity work alongside your high intensity workouts.